So, hi, my name's Carly. Welcome to a brand new podcast. We will not be catching any cod today. We will be doing a podcast. It's Blood on the Balcony. The full title is Looks Like Blood on the Balcony. This is going to be a podcast where true crime meets the paranormal, meets unexplained UFO, anything a little bit weird. They're the things that we're going to talk about on this podcast. Every week I'm going to look at something different, a different case, a different paranormal investigation, a different UFO case, you name it, whatever. Also, I'd like you guys to get involved. So if you do have any weird paranormal stories, any true crime stuff, anything at all that you might be a little bit interested in talking about, email them through to bloodonthebalcony@gmail.com. I've also got a Instagram page, Blood on the Balcony. Get that followed. Send your stories in if you want them discussed on the podcast. I may be on my own some weeks. I may have guests. We will see how it goes. But today, I'm going to start my podcast on true crime. Now, since I'm getting on a bit, no, I can't say that because I'm not old, but my kids think that I'm a little bit weird because how I relax is watching Scream, watching true crime stuff, watching paranormal stuff, anything that's going to keep you up at night, you name it. I'll watch it, and I'll watch it until I'm absolutely terrified, and I will watch it so I can't sleep. But then I never learn. Then I'll do it again the next day. So that's how I relax. They take the mickey out of me. But yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are the same as me. Some episodes are going to be really sad. Some episodes are going to make you question everything that you believe in. And some might make you double check your doors are locked at night, which happened to me on one occasion. I watched a film, and I think it was called Within. And it was about a guy that was living in the walls of this house. I think it's big in America. It's called frogging, I think. And basically they live in like your crawl spaces in your house. And he was living in the walls, and he was coming out and he was getting stuff out of the fridge, and he was like doing weird things in the house. Anyway, that was probably the worst thing that I've ever seen in my whole life. And I still think about that movie. I've watched it about 5 years ago maybe. And it still terrifies me to this day. So hopefully some of my episodes will make you feel like that. Some of them might make you think, what is she banging on about? She's a bit weird. But that's okay. I'm here for that. So my name's Carly. We're going to dive into, like I say, we're going to dive into true crime today. And the first case that we're going to be looking at has been huge in the UK. It's been something that's been discussed, something that's been challenged, something that's people are screaming for her innocence, and some people are calling for her head. So it's very divided at the moment. She was tried. She was found guilty of multiple murders, but people that know her are saying that she's being used as a scapegoat in a broken system. So I'm going to look at both sides of the story today. I'm going to be looking at if I believe, well, not just my views, but generally there's like her close friends and family are basically saying that she's innocent, and they have protested her innocence since day one. And they are saying that, like I say, she's been used as a scapegoat. So we'll dive into it. We'll have a look. We're going to be looking today. If you don't live under a rock, you will have definitely heard about this, and you will definitely have your opinions. We're going to be looking at the case of a nurse called Lucy Letby. Right, so now what we're going to look at is the babies that never came home. So these incidents all happened between 2015 and 2016 in June. The neonatal unit had more collapses, more deaths, and more unexplained emergencies. So babies were getting poorly, they were dying, and emergencies were coming up way more frequently than they have ever done before within that department. They weren't predictable. So it wasn't like, oh, we're going to watch this and this may happen, or we're going to keep an eye on this particular thing and then this might happen. There was just no inkling that these babies were going to get ill. They were very, very sudden. So it was a case of within minutes sometimes, these collapses were happening, these deaths were happening. And sometimes, like I say, they were catastrophic drops in health. So they may have been looking at a baby who was particularly poorly, but they were looking better, they were getting better. There was no inkling that this was going to happen. And then all of a sudden, boom, baby was ill. So it's, you know, a baby who was stable at 1 minute past 2 in the morning, say, would be fighting for its life at 3 minutes past. And it was so quick and so devastating that people didn't really know what was going on. Doctors searched for infections, equipment faults, human error, underlying conditions, everything. Nothing actually matched, nothing at all. It was a complete mystery to the consultants, to the neonatal nurses, to doctors, to everyone. It was completely unexplainable. There was nothing going on. And then another baby died, and then another, and then another. And medical staff with years, with decades of experience, were completely terrified. They didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know what was happening for these babies in their care to be dying. You know, if you've ever met a nurse, in particular a neonatal nurse, they are so professional and so you trust them instantly. They are the people that are taking care of these tiny little babies, and you know they're angels, really. A lot of them, you know, they want to do their jobs. They've spent years studying to do their jobs, and you know they're mortified, they're terrified. Something was going wrong in this neonatal unit. Something catastrophic was going wrong, but nobody could figure out what it was. None of the big doctors, the big consultants, nobody knew why these things, these devastating things were happening to these poor little babies. The parents were trusting the doctors, you know, they were there to make these children better, and it just wasn't happening. And like I say, nobody could figure out what was going on. So then it got to a point where the consultants decided, you know, I mean, one baby's enough to me to investigate what the hell went wrong. But anyway, you know, after a few of these babies had passed, and the consultants couldn't figure out why, the doctors couldn't figure out why, the nurses couldn't figure out why, they decided to review every single case, every single collapse, everything that had gone wrong in the neonatal unit. They were looking at who was on shift. They were looking at who administered the medication. They were looking at who entered the room last, who responded first. So every single one, they looked at in great detail, to every single bit of medication that was put into any of those babies. They looked into in great detail. And one name kept coming up, and that name was Lucy Letby. She was present for the vast majority, if not all, of the incidents. Sometimes she was there immediately before the collapse, and sometimes immediately after the collapse. Wherever these incidents were happening, Lucy wasn't far away. So the doctors then saw this pattern emerging. Lucy Letby, Lucy Letby, Lucy Letby. She was there all the time. They started to panic. They started to feel sick. Her name was coming on the schedules, and they were, I don't know, they described it as a dark cloud hanging over the unit. They were thinking, oh my God, Lucy's on shift. They had no proof that it was Lucy at this point. They just had the name and the pattern. So obviously, you know, they were bringing it up. But you don't want to blame. I understand. I've never been in a position like that. So I try and understand, should I say, why this wasn't flagged. But these members of staff just compared it to this dark cloud just hanging over the unit. So they decided they were going to approach hospital management. Now, I've heard in a few cases, I don't know how true it is, but NHS funding is given on performance, it's given on staff perform. I think it's something to do with that. I'm not 100% sure, but anyway, managers don't want their units to be in question ever. it's something that they like to fly under the radar. They get their funding, they crack on, and everything is good within their units. So when they raised concerns that something was or someone was behaving unnaturally towards these babies and was harming these babies, they didn't take it seriously. Now, to me, that's insane. They just didn't want to admit that it was anything to do with Lucy. They didn't want to say, yes, it's this person, because what a thing to accuse somebody of. You are a baby killer. Like, these babies are in their most vulnerable states, and we are blaming one person for this. So the hospital executives told the doctors, you're being unfair. You're targeting a young nurse. You're damaging staff morale. And they were blamed for bringing this up, saying that they were creating negative ripples through the neonatal unit. One doctor was actually forced to apologise to Lucy for suggesting she might be involved. So this doctor had to go to this woman and who was being accused and told to stop accusing her and stop questioning her and stop raising concerns. These hospital executives were silencing these doctors over these accusations. So they knew, they were alerted to this, but nobody did anything. So the consultants have since said, we knew something was wrong. We knew something terrible was happening to these babies, but nobody would listen. We were bringing these concerns and nobody was listening to us. So it wasn't just these, I don't want to say down the hierarchy, but that's exactly how I can explain it. Even the nurses, the neonatal unit nurses weren't the ones that were raising these concerns. These were consultants. These were the top of, above the doctors, the guys that, were really well educated and knew the signs to look for and things like that. These were the ones that were told to stop, which is just absolutely insane. Now, she wasn't just she knew what she was doing from the evidence that what the prosecution said that she did when we look at the trial now. So the police eventually did have to investigate, and they did have to look into these patterns because these doctors didn't give up. These doctors, yes, they apologised, yes, they carried on about their days, but they didn't give up. They kept raising their concerns. And the police actually did investigate in the end. They had a look what was going on, and they saw that Lucy Letby used several methods of creating harm to these children. So she would inject air into their bloodstreams. She would introduce air into their feeding tubes. She was deliberately overfeeding the babies. She was using insulin to poison the babies. And she was tampering with medical equipment. So she was doing things that she knew would not be immediately obvious without the testing, but obviously the things that were quick methods to kill. They would quickly kill the baby quietly, and there would be no clear forensic traces. So she knew what she was doing. From the evidence that the jury were presented it with in court, she knew what she was doing. In injecting blood into airstreams, you'd think that's not really going to do anything, but these are the silent killers. They're not the ones that you're going to go, oh well, that's not right. You're not going to notice it as another nurse that's going to come in like a minute later and check the baby. It's not going to be obvious. She knew the weaknesses within the ward. She knew when the parents were going to be away, so when it was going to be easy to access the babies, and she knew how to act fast and appear like she was rushing to help the babies. So she would inject this blood into the airstream, go away, and then she'd be looking like the hero. Whether or not that was what she was trying to achieve, I don't know. But that's what the prosecution's theory was anyway. By 2018, the police believed they had enough evidence to arrest her. So they'd looked into the cases, they'd looked into the evidence, and Lucy Letby's name was still being brought up. And what they found in her home actually turned the case upside down. So there was a note in Lucy's home when the police went in to search her home. They were given the warrant for her arrest, and they were given a warrant to search her property for any evidence that that might be there for them. So it was in a cluttered drawer. The detectives found a handwritten, personal, emotionally panicked note, and the one that went viral read, "I am evil. I did this. I am a horrible person. I haven't done anything wrong. I don't deserve to live. I'm scared." The prosecution then treated the note as a confession. So, when we look at the flip side, supporters of Lucy Letby were saying, this is somebody overwhelmed, bullied and depressed, not a murderer. So they were reading a note from another perspective. So she was saying she hadn't done anything wrong, she didn't deserve to live, she was scared. And so what you say, I think there's a bit of a mixed message in there. There's a bit of a difference in what she was writing. But there were still people that believed she was innocent. So in 2022, which is not that long ago at all, it's taken this long from 2016 to get to this point, to get to the trial. So in 2022, the trial began. It lasted 10 months, which was one of the longest trials in UK history. The court was presented with heartbreaking testimonies from the baby's parents, detailed medical evidence, text messages that Lucy Letby had sent, nurses' notes, expert witness analysis. So they were hammered with evidence that Lucy Letby was guilty. And from everything that they were presented with, they decided that she was a cold, calculated killer. Now, Lucy did cry at times when she was at court, but it's reported that she showed very little emotion throughout the whole thing. The prosecution said that she was horrendous. She is like a baby serial killer of all things. In August 2023, after weeks of deliberation, so they did look at everything. They looked at the innocent side, they looked at the guilty side, as the jury should do. And the evidence that they were presented with, they returned with a verdict of guilty of murdering 7 babies and guilty of attempting to murder 6 more. So that's not a great outcome for Lucy. She was given a whole life order. She would spend the rest of her life behind bars. That was it. It was done. There'd be no possibility of release, nothing. She was in jail. The end. But after the verdict, something very unexpected happened. People, including doctors, scientists, and lawyers, opened an argument that Lucy might actually be innocent. Let's look at the other side now. I was convinced that Lucy Letby was guilty. She was there every time these poor little babies died. But there were arguments for her innocence. The main arguments of those who believe that the conviction may be unsafe. So the evidential side of it, there was no forensic evidence, there was no fingerprints, no DNA, no CCTV, no eyewitnesses, no physical evidence of harm. Everything that was presented was apparently circumstantial. It was a pattern-based conviction rather than a scientific one. So they'd seen that Lucy was present at all of these horrendous things happening and came to the conclusion that she was the one that was guilty. Now, another side of it was that medical collapses can have other explanations, and it was just a coincidence that Lucy was on shift, a coincidence that Lucy was there. Some were saying she was that attentive to the babies that yes, she's going to be there just after, and yes, she's going to be there just before. So she was always very alert to what was going on around the babies. She was always on shift. She was always there all the time because she didn't want anything bad to happen. So premature babies are extremely vulnerable, as we know. You know, neonatal units are where we are fighting to save babies' lives. So doctors claim that air can enter lines accidentally. Stomach distension can be natural. Insulin levels were interpreted incorrectly, and infection rates on the ward were high as well. And equipment failures were documented. So the prosecution sometimes used rare or controversial medical theories. So every baby that did pass, there was another explanation for it, and it was just really unfortunate that it happened within this year period. Other people believe that, again, she's being used as a scapegoat. The hospital may have tried to protect itself because obviously hospitals at the moment aren't, particularly NHS hospitals, aren't in the best standing, and they haven't been for a very long time. So some people believe that the hospital was understaffed, their equipment was old and failing, there was high infection levels within the ward anyway, poor leadership, ventilation issues. If the hospital was at fault, blaming a single nurse would be much easier than admitting systematic failures. So it was easier basically to blame Lucy than for the hospital to hold their hands up and say, actually, we are massively at fault here. This is our equipment, this is our neonatal unit failing. They didn't want that stigma attached to the hospital because once it's there, it's very difficult to get rid of. The statistics were disputed. So experts did say if a person works many shifts, of course they're going to be present during these medical incidents. Of course they're going to be there. You know, if she's working because we're understaffed, then, you know, you've misused probability there. You know, you're claiming that Lucy was present, but of course she's going to be present. She's one of the main nurses on the ward. You know, she's the one that's stepping in when there's no staff. So they are arguing for her innocence, saying, of course she's going to be there. Like, you're crazy. Like, you can't just blame this woman because she works a lot, because she's on shift, and it just so happened that, you know, these babies have died. So they are on her side in that respect, and saying it needs more investigation, basically. The handwritten notes that Lucy left in her home, as I said previously, were or could have been misinterpreted. I'm evil, I did this. But she also contradicted that sentence with I haven't done anything wrong. So the note wasn't clear. It's not a clear admission that she's done anything. It was maybe her thoughts, her feelings being written down. Supporters believe that the writings are of somebody that's under suspicion, socially isolated, anxious, devastated, spiraling mentally. You know, you're a nurse, you've studied this for your whole life, and now you're being blamed. You're trying to save these babies, and now you're being blamed for killing these babies. It was a breakdown. It wasn't a confession of what she's done. Some people argue that, you know, she was at the bottom of the pit, and this is not her saying, yeah, it's me, I've done it. This was her saying, help, like, I am not a bad person. Even though she was saying it to herself, the contradiction is, I'm not a bad person, I haven't done anything wrong, you know. So there have been calls for appeal. Thousands of people have called for review. Legal experts have requested re-examination of all the evidence that was presented in court. A full judge-led inquiry is currently underway, and new medical experts are reassessing the evidence. So there is a chance that she may be told that she's innocent. Some people believe that the case may be reopened in the future, depending on these findings. There is one school friend, like I say, she has known Lucy since she was little, and she is saying Lucy would never do this. Lucy would never ever do this. Now, if you've been in a situation where somebody that you love has let you down massively, then you wonder if you ever actually know that person. So her friend could be looking at her through rose-tinted glasses. You know, she doesn't want to be the person that said actually she has done this. When she's known her so long and she's always supported her, she's not going to then turn around and say, yeah, my friend Lucy's a child killer. She's not going to do that until she's got hard proof. Because you do, for the person that, you know, people that you love, you do defend them until they prove you wrong, I suppose, until you have to say, actually, hands up, yeah, they're a bit of a dick. So the unanswered questions is why? Why would she do this? You know, she's worked her whole life to become a neonatal nurse. She's done everything in her power to get to this position. So even with the conviction, one question remains: why would she have done this? So psychologists have looked at the case and they have speculated that she was attention seeking. So she wanted the attention of the other nurses. She wanted to be seen. She wanted to be noticed, helping, always there. That's what she was going for. She wanted the hero complex. So she was inserting these this air into the baby's tubes, and then she was like, oh, I know what's wrong, and she could be always there to make the wrongs right that she'd created, which is a bit messed. But emotional instability, desire for control, or a fixation on certain doctors. So, you know, if she's in the ward and these things are happening, these doctors might be rushing in to help her, that kind of thing. But she's never actually confessed to any of this. Her story has always stayed the same. She's never explained any of the things that have gone wrong, and she's never actually admitted any guilt. So she's always protested her innocence. If she is guilty and she did do all these things, all that I said just are all assumptions. So the motive remains a mystery. If she is innocent, the true cause of those deaths is still unknown. So who's to say next month we couldn't have another spike in deaths and things like that? Now, Lucy's gone. How are we going to explain if this happens again? And for the sake of the babies, for the sake of the families, for the sake of Lucy Letby and her families, I don't know whether she deserves that or not. But yeah. So thank you for listening to episode 1 of Looks Like Blood on the Balcony. If you enjoy the deep dive into the dark, the strange and the unexplained, follow the podcast, leave a review and join me next week. We'll be looking at another case on the edge of crime, mystery and even the paranormal. Until then, keep your lights on, keep your balcony door locked, and remember, some shadows aren't empty. Some shadows watch us back. Thank you.